The next few days within this week are where the fun likely begins again. However, in the short term, Bitcoin is very much setting up for a certain direction in which we will discover in today's video. And then, of course, we'll go over the more medium to long term again. I want to continue with this thread of analysis, of course, starting with some daily price action statistics. As we can see, Tuesday is a little bit weighted in favor of positive closures versus negative closures since this bull market began in 2023, with almost 51.5% of all Tuesdays closing positively during that time. But it's the average returns both for those gaining and losing Tuesdays that we're most interested in as usual, and it gives us some ideas as to the likely boundaries for today's range. To the upside, with the average gain of just over 2%, would put Bitcoin somewhere around about 114,350, and to the downside would put a nice little boundary with an average loss at about 1.77, which is actually one of the higher losing days, in fact, second or third highest. But that would put Bitcoin around about 110 or so. So if you do see Bitcoin approach one of these numbers intraday here, you're likely to see a bit of a sort of bounce effect from these areas, meaning that if you do approach the top side of this at 114,300, you're probably going to see a little bit of a pullback, and vice versa for the downside right here. Again, on that first pass. Second pass is a different story, as we have seen in the past as well. But generally speaking, Bitcoin loves to play off of these ranges. So if you are a short-term time frame scalper, that has been working quite well, except for the last like 3 days. We haven't seen either side of the range tested, really speaking towards the very much lack of volatility in this market leading up into this week's events. Anyways, as we have been going over for the past like week, maybe week and a half now, this is kind of Bitcoin's chance to bounce this early portion of September. As I realize I should probably charge my computer, but you know, there are several things that do suggest Bitcoin is more likely to bounce, or at least if there is going to be upside, it's better to expect it early on, actually, in this portion of September. And for one thing that just fired off in the past few days was everyone's favorite indicator, the moon signals right here, which, as you can see, the traditionally more bullish moon, which is called actually a full moon, which is kind of confusing right there, which is this one right here, has fired off as of Sunday officially, and generally this has marked about a 2-week period of general gains. If we were to back test simply just opening up long positions whenever that happens and then closing them in 2 weeks when you get the next moon, here would be results over the past 10 years, generally up and to the right on the equity curve. Just kind of blindly playing this would have been profitable, which is kind of funny when you consider, you know, all of the very sophisticated strategies that some people like to get into. However, stats are stats, and at the end of the day, yeah, that actually has worked out quite well. Is this one going to work out as well here? Potentially, yes. If we go into the trade analysis, we can see that the average amount, the average winning trade has produced about 13.5% in the past 10 years. The average losing trade losing about 8%. And again, I'm not necessarily, convicted of either one of these sides getting hit, but what I am convicted of is that both of those averages likely are going to give us a good idea of, you know, where things are within the next couple weeks. Again, these are averages based off of the past 10 years. To the upside, 13% would, in my opinion, be, I mean, if this happens, I mean, that would be amazing. But that put Bitcoin on new all-time highs, just by the way, at around 125 to 126. Not bad. Again, I'd be the first person to be pretty fucking happy about that, to be honest. But of course, to the downside, shaving off 8% within the next couple weeks would put Bitcoin down around about 102 to 103-ish. I want you to keep these numbers in the back of your mind's eye because they will pop up again a little bit later. I like to interrelate all of these analyses so that you can kind of see the woven pieces, you know, fitting together in this massive, beautiful puzzle. That's the artistry of this whole thing, which is actually what, for some reason, my fucking nerdy brain loves to deal with. But of course, you know, there are a few other things that do suggest that, hey, you know, if you want to be bullish about right now, now is the time. Now is the time, you know, for things to take a leg up if they're going to take a leg up. We can see over here on the 2-day time frame for Bitcoin, there is hidden bullish divergence on that last low, which we did see at about 108, 109 region. That is still very much active, and by the way, is about to bleed into the 3-day time frame as well, which closes later tonight in about 10 hours, 6 minutes, and 16 seconds and counting. And if Bitcoin closes really anywhere here or higher, especially above 113, yeah, that indeed will confirm on Caretaker's RSI and, you know, have to be looking for continuation of this move. And that would likely position a lot of these altcoins that we've seen, especially in yesterday's, live stream, you know, for further upside, because it's actually the altcoins right now that generally look more constructive in the short term than Bitcoin, to be quite honest with you. So if Bitcoin takes a leg up here, I imagine that the ones that are already moving to the upside, that the shit coins, they're gonna do quite well during that period if that occurs, meaning that this gets continuation from here. And hey, if this hidden bullish divergence does play out, which we'll get into targets in a moment, this could be I think like a decently sized move. Anyways, on top of this, to kind of round out the short-term, bullish favoring side, is we can see not all of the higher term timeframes stochastic momentums, but the lower end of the higher term timeframes is, all pointed to the upside. The daily time frame has several of these green dots. That's the DMI supporting the stochastic oscillator in the upside direction. We can see that current momentum remains the upside on the daily time frame as long as Bitcoin's closing above more or less 110 on CME. And if you recall, there is, I guess I didn't do it for this. Maybe I did it for spot price action. Yeah. For spot price action and also CME, by the way, on the daily time frame, once we load this, you'll see that there is actually a nice trendline regression governing the last few highs on the daily right here. These correlate with, by the way, the current all-time high for Bitcoin at 124 and change, and the one over here a little bit before that at about 122 or so. So my point is that, look, if we're going to see this turn back down, you'd really start to expect this one to turn back down, I would say in no less than 2 days. So between today and I guess Thursday. What day is today? I don't fucking know. Let's just say Thursday, at the latest. It doesn't necessarily need to, turn down exactly when it tests it, but somewhere around there, which is one in the same with effectively the bullish control zone for this, on this indicator as well. So right now it looks like we're almost guaranteed a test of that, assuming Bitcoin doesn't completely shut the bed today, which I don't think it's going to. And of course, when we come into tomorrow, we'll see where that number comes back again. Now, one of two things can happen. Bitcoin either rejects here, comes back down, or we do see acceptance above and, it works its way into the bullish control zone, and that very much aligns with a continuation of this rally. Now, I should go over some generalized targets. One of them you can see on the board here already, which is effectively a Fibonacci retracement from the high to the low of this move. That's Bitcoin's current all-time high, and the low of this move thus far, a nearly, $20,000 range. Fucking insane, man. But, we've already seen the 382 level hit right here. That's what produced the high from from last Thursday at about 113,400. If Bitcoin reclaims that number and especially closes the daily above there, you're going to see all these things moving together. You're going to see daily stochastic momentum to the upside. You're going to see daily RSI, or the 2-day and the 3-day RSI having hidden bullish divergence, and a few other things as well. And I'd really imagine that we'd get some sort of price action between these two major fibs right here. And actually, the 50% level is not necessarily a fib, but 115,750 on the lower end to maybe about 117,500-ish region on the upper end, in alignment with that last high over here from August. I've got to bring it up, but I will just very quickly go over it here on Twitter. But of course, this also plays hand in hand with, where is it? I love this one. But yeah, it plays hand in hand with the meta signal setup over here. This one's still active, to be fair. Target number one obviously already been hit, which had a 74.25% probability. Target number two is at just over 57.5% probability. That is 117. So we do have multiple things coming in from completely different angles that do kind of agree on that number. And I'll give you a quick insight to actually one of the new things that's kind of being, built in the background here by my good man, Mr. Revan. We'll call him Mr. Revan. I don't have a better name for him right now. I mean, that is his name on Discord, so fair enough. But Mr. Revan, who is the progenitor of the Quantum Wave Suite whole offering, but he's working on another baby over here, which we're calling right now the Revan Ribbons. That's as good as we can figure out for right now. And when it loads, we can see that right now it actually is favoring very likely a move up, somewhere around here, given this nice box of probabilities, which is more or less the same numbers that I just spit out. It's a little bit higher, about just under 116 on the lower end, and on the upper end, actually closer to 119,800. So, a range of sort of areas of interest right there. Upon continuation, I still would kind of be biased a little more towards the lower end of that, but ultimately this will adjust, as we get, more and more daily closures. So yeah, again, what I've been saying over the past week now is more or less the same in that if there ever was a time, right now is that time. I think that this next move more or less gets confirmed with any sort of a closure on a daily time frame, especially above that Thursday high that we saw from last week. That's 113,400. There's going to be ebbs and flows on the short-term time frames, obviously, but There is a super, super simplistic way of looking at this price action right now, just from the daily perspective and just using the price action pivots indicator, which it's just beautiful, man. It's just fucking beautiful. Look, above that last Thursday high, which is your price action pivot high, hey, respect the upside, man. Respect the upside because there's a lot of things pointed towards, further continuation, and it could be decent as well. To the downside, I want to really highlight last Friday's low. And you could say the same thing about many things in this market, shit coins and also less than shit coins. Basically, last week's lows are a pretty big pivot for a lot of these things, Bitcoin included here. So for Bitcoin, it would be Friday's low of basically just 110. If you see that number taken out to the downside, even with a trade at this point, even with a tick, it doesn't necessarily need to close below there, although that certainly would add a lot of confidence to this. That's where I say, hey, Bitcoin is really getting ready for a push down now. Like, forget about the fucking upside in the short term because downside is about to sweep this market. We got all of those things. I want to now speak about sort of the medium and long term here because while I have been speaking about in the past week for the short term, likely upside, or at least this would be the period for it. Later on, there does still exist several things that suggest this is not done correcting, and I'll just put it bluntly right there. So while we did go over the old witch signal over here with the moons, we can look at this from a little bit more of a nuanced perspective. Now, I don't want to get into full astrologer mode here, but again, I just care about statistics. I just care about the numbers. I don't care what derives it, to be honest with you, because if you can show me some uniformity, if you can show me data that supports it, I will believe. That's just how you decide to live my life. Take it or leave it. You don't have to think the same way. But hey, this moon, the moon that we are seeing right now, is actually a very particular moon in I guess astrology, or it's actually in like agriculture, to be honest. But it's called a blood moon, or a harvest moon, or a harvest corn moon. Anyways, blood moon, as the name would imply, has generally not been good for price action when we can plot the ones in the past. So what I've done here is I've gone through the past 10 years or so and marked off all of the prior blood moons. We've actually seen one relatively recently. This was back here in the March correction. From the time when the moon fired off to the next low, Bitcoin lost about 12.5% over about a month. Now, there was a rally in between, just from the moon itself, did not necessarily go straight to the downside. But obviously, this correction was not done correcting. And 30 days later, 28 days later, it was decently lower from that initial moon. If we go to the one before that, we can see this was actually on the FTX collapse. Do these things correlate? I don't fucking know, but again, it is interesting. And if you measure from the actual moon to the next low, again, losing about 16.5%. This one happening a lot sooner, by the way, about 2 weeks. From that official date. This one over here was during the May 22 collapse. This was like Luna 3AC times. Again, fired off right here. There was a rally in between. Obviously did not produce any sort of an uptrend, but later on we did see the catastrophic fall off in the next 30 days, 33.5% to the downside, actually a little bit more than that. Again, same thing over here, firing off right around here. Between then and the next major low, which was 31 days later, was 26.25% move to the downside. So on and so forth. I don't want to bore you with too much of this, but yes, in all of these instances, we have seen lower from that moon within about 30 days, some a little bit earlier, some a little bit later, yes, but around that time. And seeing how this one fired off over here when Bitcoin was more or less, like 111-ish, if we go with the lower end of that, even 10% off that number puts Bitcoin somewhere around $100,000, which is a very interesting number. And also going to correlate to some other things that we're about to get into. But yeah, this, as I alluded to earlier, was in alignment with the downside target off of the average loss for the usual moon setup over here. A lot of fucking words there, but you get what I'm saying. Anyways, if you stayed around this long. Anyways, I want to bring up another setup as well. So we've been going over the higher term timeframes as each and every one of these populates their own setup, which I like to relate to, which I like to use the red and yellow moving average whenever they cross over. With the red moving average crossing the downside of the yellow moving average, generally there is a nice corrective move down to the green moving average. Every time. It sometimes takes different forms and twists and turns, but at minimum, Bitcoin gets down around there. Now, the 4-day time frame is going to be closing tonight. So we've seen this on the daily, the 2-day, the 3-day time frame. Now I've gone to the 4-day time frame. We're seeing it yet again. And what I've actually done here is I've actually not used a 5 EMA for the red. I've actually used a 4 EMA for the red. And we can see that this one actually already officially crossed as of last week. So again, there may be a rally right here, but historically speaking, this setup especially loves to hit the green moving average sooner rather than later. I mean, the last time we saw this, again, minimum target, Bitcoin went there nearly immediately and then stayed there, below there for a while. Good corrective signal. Same thing over here. This one hitting it basically more or less in the same go. This one over here taking a little bit of time, a couple of weeks, I suppose. But yeah, got there relatively fast. Again, minimum correction. There's always wicks lower. There's never just been a wick right to there. Same thing over here. Same thing over here. Same thing over here, and we can go to cycles prior as well. Works out the same way, although I didn't necessarily put it on my tester. But yeah, same thing right here. Boom, down to the green. Yes, low over time. Boom, down to the green. That found its low about there. Very, very slight amount lower, and then big move up. Same thing over here. Boom, big move to the downside below the green, but had a nice rally after that. Same thing over here, here, and here, and so on and so forth. Again, I won't bore you with the details of this. So what's interesting about this setup, in my opinion, is that from the cross actually happening, contrary to several of the other higher term time frame setups that we've looked at, this one, I actually am yet to find an instance where there's a rally in between before hitting the green moving average. Yeah. Whereas other setups, we have seen like decent rallies in between. So if I'm looking at this, it would suggest that Bitcoin, maybe gets a little bit more of a bounce here to like 115 or so, the lower end of kind of what we spoke about earlier. But it would be suggesting, it's a lot more likely to come down to that green moving average, at least. Again, that's a minimum target. And that's at where? 103,500. Oh, what do you know? Very similar to the proposed target from this setup over here. Crazy. Completely different setups. I mean, we're talking about fucking astrology. Like, for fuck's sake, what the hell is that? I don't even know. I don't fucking know. It's something to do with planets and mostly probably bullshit. Who knows? Maybe it's legit. I don't know, but I know that probably most people would be doing a lot better following the fucking moons than they would discretionarily trading on the 5-minute time frame. It's a humbling fact, and hey, I'm probably part of that crew too. Anyways, yeah, more than likely to come down here. Again, that's a minimum target. Maybe get a wick down a little bit lower. I don't know, but somewhere around there, again, kind of makes sense, at least in the way that, we've been looking at this. So just another setup that's populated here. This one, again, closed tonight in just under 10 hours. If Bitcoin effectively closed below, especially like 111.5, I mean, the cross has already happened, to be fair, but, it's just, I guess it looks more and more like, again, it's going to have that downside move a lot sooner rather than later. At least that's what we have seen historically. So my point is that while Bitcoin does have some setups in play here, and especially the altcoins are the ones that I actually have been looking, demonstrably better in the short term. This is kind of like, in my opinion, it's like, it's either now or not for a long time, in my opinion. So yeah, especially as long as Bitcoin's below basically last Thursday's high, again, that 113,420 number, great number. Look, I want to have the hopium. I do, but I think that these higher term time frame setups take precedence here. And what I see across the market is, there's very few people probably even watching at this point, but there's a lot of excitement, and it's less. So this cycle has been completely different in one way that I feel very few people have even acknowledged, or maybe they're just not even aware of it. The altcoin season, the alts in general, they've not been the big winners. Yes, there have been some, absolutely. There's always gonna be some, but the alt season has been in the crypto related stocks. Like, look at this shit. I'll show you some shit. Look at fucking Circle when it went IPO. When you see all of these companies go IPO, in traditional markets, that's usually like an end of sort of bubble type of thing. You saw it go fucking epically to the upside here from its listing at like $60 all the way up to $300, now straight down. I mean, this thing's done for a very long time. Again, you're going to see rallies along the way, but it's done for a long time. I saw this thing as well. This thing went to the fucking moon over here and then back down, coming back down to earth. This one over here, it's even integrated within the current administration and, straight up and then straight down. They're all fractals of the same chart. This is the same shit that we see during these alt season craze bullshits. It's the same fucking thing. Just because it's in the stock market, do not think that they're immune from the same things. We're all goddamn humans with the same machinery in our brain, or same circuitry in our brain. My point is, human psychology reigns supreme. Anyways, so what am I trying to say? I'm saying that the exuberant irrationality has been in the stock market more than the actual crypto market. Because as you know, it's been pretty fucking quiet here. It's been pretty fucking quiet. And we also got MicroStrategy as well, just doing its thing. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling on a little bit too much. I apologize about that. This video is much longer than anyone should ever really listen to, but that's okay. I'll continue to ramble here because that's just who I am. Anyways, I'll be signing off on that note. As always, I wish everyone the best. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully during a live stream on Wednesday.